Should you invest in a dedicated camera like the Fuji X-M5 or purchase a camera that has a gimbal stabilizer like the Osmo Pocket 3? This camera is almost $400 more than the Pocket 3 if you get the kit lens, but it does have an APS-C sensor which is much larger than the Pocket 3's 1-inch sensor. But how does that actually translate in real life situations? Does this camera really have a $400 difference if you're just a casual shooter? Take a look at this driving shot, for example. Both cameras were set to 4K 24, preset in their standard color profiles. I set auto white balance to on, and I underexposed both cameras by 1 full stop. I was using the kit lens with the X-M5, and I didn't color grade either shot. You can see that the colors, the clarity, and the sharpness seem to be pretty close. If anything is different, it might be in the focal length. But if you're looking at the colors and the image quality, you may be looking in the wrong spot. Still don't see much of a difference other than the color science? Watch what happens when I scale in on this tree line. Camera A seems to be less noisy than camera B. But watch what happens when I press play. Just look at all those micro jitters on camera A. So where you might gain in image quality, you lose out on stabilization. But no one is going to scale in like this on your images, so let's keep it simple. Can you see any big difference between these waves that I shot in 4K 60? We can clearly see here that there's a difference in the sky color and potentially the clarity in the waves themselves. But other than that, the watercolor is the same, and I'm not seeing a lot of noise in those shadows. And how about this shot when the sun is high in the sky and both cameras have fast shutter speeds and virtually no motion blur? I know I can't really tell a big difference between these two shots, and honestly, they both look pretty good. Even this comparison overhead product shot looks pretty close. In fact, I kind of like the skin tones on camera B better. So today, I'm gonna put both of these cameras through their paces and put them into situations you may find yourself in if you're just bringing either of these cameras along with you to create some content. If you're on the fence about buying either of these cameras, I created some project file links for you to download the footage that I got with both of these cameras so that you can download them and then use that footage on your rigs to see how your rigs can handle it. I'll leave that download link to the free project file pack in the description. This video is not sponsored by Fuji or by DJI. In fact, it doesn't have any sponsors. I bought both of these cameras with my own money, but if you'd like to support the channel, you could use the affiliate links in the description to purchase your camera gear, or you could purchase one of my courses. In fact, I made a course on the Osmo Pocket 3 on how I set it up, how to shoot with it in different lighting situations, and how to get the most out of it. I'll leave a link to that course in the description. I'm ready to share with you my results, and please let me know which one of these two cameras you like better and why. And that's the game plan today on the Film Alliance. If by the end of this video you're still undecided about which one of these two cameras is best for you, I made a free camera quiz that may help you get on the right track, and I'll leave that quiz in the description. If you recognize the cameras in the comparison shots at the start of this video, then you have a keen eye, my friend. It was easy for me to know which one was which because I could easily see their file names in the video editor, but sometimes I did have to take a double take to make sure that I was looking at the proper images. So that's how close both of these cameras are, especially when we're in uncontrolled lighting environments. I'll be showing you comparisons throughout this entire video while I talk about both cameras, and I'll tell you what I like about both of them and what I don't like about them. Like this shot, for example. I love the look in the ocean of the sky that I got with the X-M5. But I also love that the Osmo Pocket 3's composition is completely still. It's almost as if I had it on a tripod when I was actually hand-holding both cameras. Although these cameras do have some similarities, they are very different. And I'll try to cover all of those differences in this video so you know which camera is best for you. So if you like videos like this one, make sure to like this video so I know to make more videos like this one. The Fuji X-M5 has an APS-C CMOS sensor, and it's capable of shooting in 4K up to 60 frames per second, or 6K up to 30 frames per second. It can shoot video in 422 10-bit internally, it weighs 12 ounces without a lens on it, and it was created for people who want to make the leap from their smartphones to a dedicated camera. The Osmo Pocket 3 is marketed as having a 1-inch 9.4 megapixel sensor, capable of shooting 4K up to 120 frames per second. It supports 10-bit D-Log recording. It weighs only 6.3 ounces, so that's half the weight of the X-M5, and it features a fixed 20mm f2.0 lens. Its built-in 3-axis gimbal is a game changer because it delivers incredibly smooth footage even when you're walking over rugged terrain. But with that said, take a look at how both of these cameras' images have a very similar color science with this basketball shot in 4K 60 frames per second. If it wasn't for that little shake that you see with the X-M5, you may not know which camera is which. And that's a testament to the Osmo Pocket 3's 1-inch sensor. Even though it's a lot smaller, it still puts out a very good image. But even when I brought both of these cameras into the studio and we shot this color checker, I was pretty surprised on how close the colors looked. You can see a big difference when you look at the greens when I crop back and forth like this. The X-M5 was released in late 2024 with a starting price of $799, and the Osmo Pocket 3 was released in October of 2023 with the starting price of $519 US. And as of the time of recording this video, the X-M5 is back ordered for the next 4 months. And the Osmo Pocket 3 spent the first year of its life back ordered, but now seems to be back in stock. Because the Osmo Pocket 3 was released over a year ago, that means used units are now available to purchase on eBay and other used camera gear sites. And I found one for as cheap as $420. And because the X-M5 is on back order for so long, I think it's going to be a little bit before we see any of these used units hit the market at a reasonable price. But with all that being said, there's still a pretty big difference in the price and not a big difference in the image quality when shooting in uncontrolled lighting environments. Like this shot of the star on the Christmas tree, it tells me that the Osmo Pocket 3 can hold its own. There are several differences, like the whites on the bristles, the Christmas tree, and also how everything in the foreground of the Osmo Pocket 3 is in focus, but it may not be enough for someone to say, I want to spend that extra money to pick up the X-M5. We're going to do a deep dive into image quality later in the video, where the X-M5 really starts to shine, but I wanted to get that out there just to lay the groundwork. The X-M5 has a traditional feel to it. It's a dedicated camera with buttons and dials and an articulating touchscreen. So you can customize the outside of the camera however you want. You can change the dials, the buttons, and everything is kind of right here at your fingertips. It does have a touchscreen, so you could go through the menu system if you wanted to, but because it has so many buttons and dials, you can get to a lot of that without having to dive into the touchscreen. But one small complaint that I have personally is the grip on the X-M5. It's so small, it's hard to hold on to. And if I want to hold this camera with one hand, I have to press both sides of the camera like this in order to get a grip on it. And when I do this, I inadvertently press on these buttons back here, and it becomes a problem. Thankfully, SmallRig sent me out a camera cage that I quickly put onto this camera. It not only greatly enhanced the grip of the actual camera, but it also prevents any damage in case I end up dropping the camera. I'll leave a link to that SmallRig cage in the description. The Osmo Pocket 3 is slimmer, lighter, and it can be held vertical when you're shooting horizontal, which is one of my favorite perks because you're not as noticeable. Like if you have a camera in your hands, it's a lot more noticeable than if you're holding the Osmo Pocket 3. Also, the Osmo Pocket 3 is a one-handed camera where you can have a free hand, whereas with the X-M5, I feel like it's a two-handed camera because, like I mentioned, I don't have a good grip without the cage on it, so I almost have to open up the touch display and hold it like this when I'm shooting with it. The Pocket 3 also has a touchscreen, and that's how you navigate to a majority of the things that you need within the menu system, along with your exposure. But it does have a joystick right here, which controls the gimbal head and a record button. The gimbal head on the Osmo Pocket 3 will rotate 180 degrees, so you could use this camera as a vlog camera and still be able to see what you're seeing on the display right in front of you. And the X-M5 has that fully articulating display, so if you were doing some type of vlog work, you could see what your composition looks like right on the display. The X-M5 has a mic port, headphone port, a USB-C port for transferring data and charging the camera, along with a micro HDMI port, which means you can externally record and monitor your footage if you have it hooked up to an external monitor. Whereas the Osmo Pocket 3 only has one USB-C port here on the bottom. You can hook up USB-C headphones to your Osmo Pocket 3 and then listen to the playback to make sure your audio levels are correct. But when it comes to more control over your audio and your microphone itself, the X-M5 is the way to go. Both cameras have the ability to interchange their media, which is great because that means once you run out of storage on one of your SD cards, you can swap it out with another SD card. Whereas with smartphones, when your storage fills up, kind of out of luck unless you offload that footage. Now, a big difference between both of these cameras is that you can interchange the batteries with the Fuji X-M5, whereas you're stuck with the battery that's in the Osmo Pocket 3. You could always get an external battery for your Osmo Pocket 3 if you pick up the Creator Combo Kit, but I'm not sure how that would work if the internal battery in the Osmo Pocket 3 dies, meaning it runs out of battery and then it just doesn't work anymore. I don't know if that external battery will bypass that battery. I guess we'll have to find that out over time because batteries inside these devices do die. I haven't had any issues with the battery that's in my Osmo Pocket 3, but it's just something to think about. While the X-M5 can interchange batteries, The Osmo Pocket 3 has a built-in stabilization gimbal head, which means you do not need to use electronic stabilization. You can't use electronic stabilization with the Osmo Pocket 3 anyways, but because it has a gimbal head, that means you're using mechanical stabilization, whereas you have to use electronic stabilization with the X-M5. Electronic stabilization can introduce warping or jello effects, especially when you're in lower light environments, because it relies on cropping on the image and digitally compensating for the movement. So anytime I was doing any type of moving shots, the Osmo Pocket 3 shined over the X-M5. But one more thing before I forget about the batteries, both of them last about the same amount of time. When you run out of juice with the Osmo Pocket 3, if you hook it up to a USB-C charger, you can charge this thing in almost 20 minutes, all the way up to 100%. Whereas with the X-M5, you have to take the battery out, put it onto a wall charger, and you're looking at about 2 to 3 hours. And if you charge the battery through the camera's USB-C port, you're looking at about the same amount of time. But you can buy a bunch of third-party batteries for this camera for pretty cheap and just have them all charged and thrown in your camera bag before you go out to shoot. Although I haven't owned the X-M5 for very long, I've owned the Osmo Pocket 3 for almost a year and I have shot quite extensively with it. I've shot everything from green screen work to log shots. As a travel camera, I used it as a creative shots camera. I did some hyperlapses with it, but I've tested all of the modes and the settings with both of these cameras, optimizing them both to get the best image quality that I could possibly get. If you're a brand new beginner, both cameras will require a learning curve to learn how to use each of them, but the X-M5 will take extensively longer. If you're a beginner, you could open up the Osmo Pocket 3 and start shooting the same day, whereas you might have to do some setup with the X-M5 if you open this thing up. You could switch both cameras to auto exposure and go out and start filming with both of them or taking photography, but both cameras also have the ability to use manual exposure, so you'll have a lot more control when it comes to exposing your shots, with the exception of aperture. The Osmo Pocket 3 has a fixed aperture because of its fixed lens, so you can adjust the shutter speed and the ISO, whereas depending on what lens you're using with your X-M5, you'll have access to ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, which gives you a lot more flexibility when it comes to exposure. And that brings up the next point, which is the X-M5 comes as an interchangeable lens camera, and it has Fujifilm X mount, which means you'll have way more creative freedom if your budget allows on lens selection. So you can select the best lenses for different situations, like a wide angle lens for landscapes or a telephoto lens for wildlife shots. It just lets you achieve different effects and image quality, whereas with the Osmo Pocket 3, you're stuck with the fixed 20mm lens. Now with that being said, the camera on the Osmo Pocket 3 is a great camera no matter the fact that it's a fixed 20mm focal length. I have found that I could get away with 80% of what I do with the Pocket 3 before I even need to pull out a more dedicated camera like the X-M5. But that's just me. It really depends on what you're doing as far as content creation goes. What are you shooting? That way you can decide on which one of these two cameras is best for you. The Osmo Pocket 3 does have the Mimo app, which helps with remote shooting and editing on the go. Although I am hesitant to connect apps to my camera because number one, it's gonna drain the battery a lot faster. But number two, these camera company apps are super buggy and sometimes they don't connect. So you're sitting there for a couple minutes trying to connect it and you can't get it to work. I just prefer to use the cameras as they are, right within the camera, and not rely on any outside app, unless I'm doing a firmware update. A key advantage to the Pocket 3 is its ability to track subjects. So all I have to do is double click on the subject on the screen and the gimbal head will lock onto a subject, and you could walk in a parallax motion or drive by something or even do a hyperlapse and the camera will stay locked on that subject. Whereas if you try to do a parallax shot with the X-M5 while you're hand holding it, it's not gonna look too good, as you can see here. Software updates are a lot easier to do with the Osmo Pocket 3 because all you have to do is connect it to the Mimo app. This is probably the one time that I will connect it to the Mimo app so that I can download firmware. Whereas with the X-M5, you have to do it through the SD card on a computer, then you have to bring it back to your camera and you have to take some steps in order to do the firmware updates. Unless there's another way to do it that I'm unaware of. Originally, when I bought this camera, I had the kit lens on it and it was shut off after about 20 seconds of recording. So I had to update the firmware on the kit lens by going through that process and that fixed the problem. But it did make me realize that, man, the Osmo Pocket 3 is a lot easier to update its firmware. I bought the Osmo Pocket 3 Creator Combo Kit, which includes a wide angle adapter lens, and that adjusts the focal length from 20mm to about 15mm. So that gave me a little bit wider clearer of a shot, but I was seeing a lot more distortion in the corners. And if you get the Creator Combo Kit for the Osmo Pocket 3 like I did, you're gonna be able to pick up the DJI Mic 2, which will seriously enhance your audio input on the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 compared to the native mic. But for now, let's just take a listen to both of these onboard mics from these cameras in a real life situation where I'm vlogging. All right, here's our vlog shot with the Fuji X-M5 in a semi-low light situation against the Osmo Pocket 3. We're using the native mic with inside of this camera, but we're also looking at that stabilization. If I was to really use this camera as a vlog camera, how good would the stabilization be compared to the Osmo Pocket 3? All right, vlog shot test with the Osmo Pocket 3 in a semi-low light situation. Right now I have a light breeze coming in on my left. We're also listening to the audio. This is the onboard mics of the Osmo Pocket 3. We want to see what that sounds like compared to the Fuji X-M5. One advantage of the DJI Mic 2 with the Osmo Pocket 3 is once you have it hooked up to your Osmo Pocket 3, you can actually see audio levels on the screen of the Osmo Pocket 3, so you can visually monitor and making sure you're not peaking. The audio levels are also displayed on the touchscreen of the X-M5, so if you do not have headphones to be able to monitor your audio, you can always visually do it through the display. For this comparison, I mostly use the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 as my main lens for the X-M5. That way I could get a very similar focal length to the Osmo Pocket 3. But we have to remember that when we're shooting with the stabilization on, we're gonna get a pretty heavy crop, 1.41, I believe, on the X-M5. So even when using the same exact lens and getting about the same focal length, I have a heavy crop on the X-M5, which means my compositions were a little bit off. Another great feature of the Osmo Pocket 3 is its ability to lock the camera in place if you hold down the joystick, because that will reduce unwanted movements. So when I do a pushing forward like this, you can actually see that the Osmo Pocket 3 stays in one spot and it locks my horizon. Whereas with the Fuji X-M5, I might be getting a little bit of shake and also my horizon might be off. I noticed that both cameras really excelled when it came to doing low light shooting, especially when I was shooting landscapes. Take a look at this landscape of the ocean just as the sun set. Both cameras give off a different color cast in the sky, and I personally like them both equally, but it really just comes down to what you like better. With the X-M5, you're gonna get a cleaner image in low light, and with the Osmo Pocket 3, you're gonna get better stabilization. Even when I'm hand holding the camera and getting this driving shot in the low light hours, you can see that there's micro jitters with the X-M5, but the shadows and the sky color seem to be a lot cleaner. I've also actually had a couple of people comment about shooting Christmas lights, because I think that's actually a thing that people like to do around this time of year, is they go around and shoot Christmas lights. So I took it out to see how both of these will perform in the nighttime hours. And I think both of them did fairly well. But as you can see here, both cameras have different colors when you're looking at the same exact light. This really would just come down to which one you like better. And one of the big differences when it comes to night shooting, you're gonna get a lot more noise with the Osmo Pocket 3, but your footage will be a lot smoother, especially if you're not using electronic stabilization. You can really see what I mean here with the X-M5. When I was walking with both cameras, hand-holding the cameras, just freely walking, trying to keep the cameras as steady as possible, you can see a lot of jello effect and jitteriness with the X-M5. The Pocket 3 does have a low light mode, but it sacrifices D-Log capability, which could enhance your low light results in my opinion. I recommend using the regular video mode and adjusting your settings manually for low light shots. I cover this in more detail with the Pocket 3 course. When you record an F-Log with the X-M5, you're gonna have a lot more room to grade your footage in post-production than you will with the Pocket 3. I think the D-Log footage on the Pocket 3 is a great place to start if you're new to log footage, but the X-M5 will have a lot more dynamic range for me to color grade my footage. It may be a little trickier for someone to just jump in to log with the X-M5. However, there is a practical solution for those of you who wanna shoot in log and learn how to color grade it, and this is what I tell people in my courses. Go out and get a shot in log footage with either of these cameras, and then get that same exact shot in their standard color profiles. Then come home and put those two clips next to each other and see if you can grade your footage on the log to look very similar to your standard color profile. As soon as you get it to look about the same, then you'll be on the right track to start testing out different artistic looks. It's not easy and you're gonna need some practice, but you will eventually get the hang of it. The reason you're gonna wanna shoot in log is you'll have more color control over your final image. So if you're ever mixing two cameras, let's say I'm shooting with a Fuji and a Sony camera, in post-production, I'll be able to get my colors to match up. If I don't, and I just shoot in the standard color profiles using these two cameras, for the most part, my skies will look different, my greens will look different, and tree colors will look different. There'll be a lot of differences, so you wanna get your colors to match up as close as possible if you're using two different cameras. If all you're looking for is better stabilization and good image quality, then just go with the Osmo Pocket 3. But if you want greater creative control like different film looks, better low light performance, better photography stills, 6K video recording, the fact that you can interchange lenses, then go with the X-M5. I also forgot to mention that with the X-M5, you can record externally in Blackmagic RAW. And that's a huge plus for anybody who wants to do professional grade work. Also, the X-M5 has film simulations. So you can go out there and get a bunch of different film looking type shots. Whereas with the Pocket 3, you have the standard mode, the D-Log, M mode, and also HLG. But that's it for when it comes to color profiles. So you have a lot more color profiles to choose from. And that's one of the reasons why this camera is so popular. The Pocket 3 is definitely better for beginners. I was able to pick it up fairly quickly, but I have a lot of experience with cameras. So if you're a beginner and you don't know anything about cameras, just wanted to go with the camera, then I would say just go with the Osmo Pocket 3 to start out. But if you're brave and you want to jump into the world of dedicated content creation, then go with the X-M5 because it'll make you stretch and learn and you will not be sorry. If I had to choose between both of these cameras, I would probably pick up the X-M5 with the kit lens over the Pocket 3, but that's because I have a lot of experience with this stuff. If I was a brand new beginner, then I would probably pick up the Pocket 3. But it really just depends on what you're doing. I really wish the Osmo Pocket 3 was available when I first started. It would have made an excellent first camera. I do wish that the gimbal head was a little bit stronger because I'm always afraid I'm gonna drop this thing and break it, which I have dropped it before, but so far so good. And I also wish that I could unlock the gimbal so I could get more of a handheld look, rather than having it look so clinical. I have not shot much with the HLG profile in the Pocket 3, mainly because not everyone has HLG monitors. If someone watches HLG footage on an SD monitor, it's gonna look very overexposed. So that's my comparison between the X-M5 and the Osmo Pocket 3. I hope that I set you on the right course so you know which camera to choose. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. One of the most asked questions that I receive is which camera should I buy? I know that you want to make the right decision, and it's a big decision. You want to find the camera that best suits your needs and stays within your budget. Many of you know which camera might be for you, but you need some guidance pinpointing it and feeling confident in your decision. That's why I made this course. I want to put my camera experience and knowledge into a compact and easy to follow format. I jam-packed it with camera buying fundamentals that I guarantee you will carry through the rest of your camera journey. I based this entire course on all the things that I wish I had known or someone had told me when I first started out. From understanding different camera types and their features to matching them with your specific video and photography needs, this course covers it all. After finishing, I'm confident that you'll finally have clarity over every angle and aspect that you might consider when buying a camera. I'll guide you through my entire camera buying process, taking you 90% of the way there. That way you'll be well prepared to make your decision. This is essentially all the guidance that I would give my own brother if he asked me, "Hey Joe, which camera should I buy?" Now I'm going to share that insight with you.